Thanks very much indeed. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Stephen Walker and I'm your host today. I'm a writer and a broadcaster, and I'm a big fan of this place. A number of the books that I've written, I've used PRONI quite a lot. And in my BBC work, I used it particularly when the state papers are released on twice a year. And I think, as I've said before, probably from this very podium, this is one of Northern Ireland's hidden secrets, and it really is a gem. We have a fantastic array of speakers today, and later on we're going to have a panel discussion, and we're looking forward today talking about the future of archives, the next 100 years, which is no small challenge. Predicting the future, as we all know, is never easy. But when it comes to public records and archives, I think we can use the experience that we have in this room, and indeed your experience of using PRONI, to try and map out some of the themes and ideas and the kind of things that we should be looking out for. Last year, I was privileged to take part in an event here marking PRONI's centenary. So it is a joy back discussing the next step. As I said, for journalists, for historians, members of the public, this really is an Aladdin's cave of stories. The building, in my view, is a treasure trove. So it is appropriate that our first speaker's contribution is entitled "The Launch of PRONI's 100 Treasures" publication. And you've probably seen the book at the back, which is a most handsome publication. And so congratulations to everyone involved in that. So without further ado, please welcome the Deputy Secretary from the Department of Communities, Emer Morelli.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you all for coming here today. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Emer Morelli, and as Stephen said, I'm the Deputy Secretary in the Department for Communities. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of Minister Lyons, who sends his apologies and wishes everyone best wishes for the event today. The Minister had the opportunity recently to visit PRONI and enjoyed a really fascinating tour of the archive and the building here. He was impressed by the sheer range of records and its commitment and passion of its staff. And I have to say, I'm very, very proud of the staff in PRONI. You're a part of my group too. I strongly recommend that everyone should take the opportunity to visit PRONI, and hopefully it won't be a hidden secret for too much longer. As many of you will be aware, the Public Record Office in Northern Ireland, or PRONI as it's more commonly known, was established on the 22nd of June 1923 and opened to the public on the 3rd of March 1924. At its inception, PRONI had no archives in its possession. Today, it has amassed over 3 million documents, dating from 1219 onwards. No mean feat. The archives and records in PRONI are of significant social, economic and historical importance, and a testament to the vision and dedication of PRONI staff over the years in using their expertise and resources to identify and preserve those records and make them available for the information, education and enjoyment of the public today and tomorrow. Through its work, PRONI plays an important role in contributing to the Department for Communities' commitment to harness culture and heritage collections to achieve meaningful outcomes for individuals and communities. To mark its centenary year, PRONI has delivered a year-long programme of activities and engagement, and I hope you all had an opportunity to engage in at least some of those events. This is the final event in that programme. PRONI 100 has enjoyed many successes throughout the year, including staging one of the most successful exhibitions ever, Ulster Scots and the Declaration of Independence, which was launched by US Special Envoy Joe Kennedy III. The exhibition was jointly presented with the Ulster Scots Agency and included an original official Declaration of Independence printed by John Dunlap. It was also fitting that PRONI welcomed an official visit from His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester to mark PRONI's centenary. I had the opportunity to attend that visit with the Duke and with David Huddleston here, and I have to say the Duke was most impressed. An architect by background, I think he was very surprised at the range of documents available in the archive here. And I think, to talk to Stephen's point, there's a wealth of information in this building that we need to share and get out to the wider public. PRONI also secured the loan of the original Belfast Good Friday Agreement from the National Archives, UK, to mark its 25th anniversary. PRONI toured the agreement to venues across Northern Ireland and at 25th anniversary events such as the International Conference at Queen's University Belfast. Today is a significant milestone, marking the centenary of the opening of PRONI to the public, and I would like to thank my colleagues for working collaboratively across the department to produce the magnificent commemorative publication, the PRONI 100 Treasures, which is available or is at the back of the room. There was quite a lot of debate and what made it into the top 100. So the final editor, I believe, was David's. Well, you're responsible. Yes. So thank you for all the work on that. The treasures have been selected from the 3 million documents in the archives. Each has been selected with care and is inclusive of all areas across Northern Ireland and reflect our many different communities and traditions. The records also provide an international dimension with linkages to North America, emigration and travel. As PRONI enters its second century, it will continue to play a leadership role in the archive sector and in securing the future of physical and digital records. I have every confidence that as a leading cultural, archives and heritage institution, it will grow in strength in contributing positively to an understanding of the different cultures and identities that comprise our community memory. PRONI 100 Treasures will be of interest to everybody that calls this place home or has a link with these shores. It is my pleasure, therefore, to officially launch the publication today. I would like to end by thanking you all for your attendance and to wish PRONI every success for another 100 years. And to restate what I said at the start, I would encourage everyone to take a tour of PRONI and to understand what is in our archive here today. Thank you very much.
Emer, thanks very much. Indeed, there's another plug for the book. So you're getting a plug, I think, on every speech. Never mind 100 treasures. You might have 100 plugs by the time today is finished, but a very worthwhile publication. As I said earlier, today's presentation is part of an ongoing series, as Emer was saying, looking at 100 years. To tell us more, please welcome the Head of Public Services at PRONI, Stephen Scott.
This is the heaviest book I've ever been involved in, by the way. If you haven't had a copy, it's during the suggest you have a look later. So thank you very much, Stephen. I'm just going to say a few words about the PRONI 100 Treasures. This project literally was a year in the making. We started it way back early 2023. Now at the outset, I was acutely aware that we don't have a document that's as well known as Magna Carta. We don't have a document that's as well known as the Declaration of Independence, or even the Declaration of Our Growth. And now they are great documents in the world. They were completely revolutionary, and it's right that they're celebrated. However, within PRONI, we have some great documents too, and we've got some of the oldest documents in the island of Ireland. Many of them have been overlooked and under-promoted and deserve to be elevated. And that's what I hope this book will do. It celebrates all our treasures. It's exceeded all my expectations, and that's a tribute to all the people involved across the wider PRONI and the wider Department for Communities. So just to tell you what we did, PRONI has 3 million records. So we obviously weren't going to capture all 3 million. We put a call out to staff to suggest candidates, nominations, and we asked for items that could tell a story that was significant and that weren't written by Hitler. We do have a Hitler letter in the archive. We received about 350 suggestions and established a working group to painstakingly evaluate every one of those 350. And it took months. And we painstakingly reduced that to 100. And many of our favourite documents didn't make the cut. So you could easily have done another 2 books of this, and they would have been brilliant. We're acutely conscious that we didn't want this to be a Belfast-centric publication. So with documents written all around the Northern Ireland and further afield. I'm now going to just thank a few folk and then play a video. There should be a list of folk coming up on the screen in movie titles, and there's just so many people involved, so I can't read out every thanks. So if I apologise if there's somebody I've missed, but there's a few people I do want to highlight. I want to pay particular thanks to the Department for Communities graphics team who worked miracles all year, particularly Craig Murray and Karen Hanlon. And they didn't just design the book, they were responsible for all our branding over the year. And that's been superb. I want to also thank the DFC comms team, particularly Rebecca Steele, who's unflinchingly supportive. No request was ever too much. She never said no. I want to thank PRONI's graphics team, particularly Gareth Montgomery, for the attention to detail in the photographs and the images. I want to thank PRONI's private records team for doing all the donkey work that goes unseen, getting permissions. And thanks also to PRONI's conservation team for making sure these records were in a state we could digitize. Now, none of these public events over the year would have been possible without the support of our premises and facilities management teams. So I want to thank them. And finally, I want to thank the public services team who knocked it out of the park this year. Particularly Jillian, Lindsay, Des, Rosita, Rebecca, Zoe, the rest of the team. A special word for Grace, who really kept us all in line over the year. And I think we'd have been all over the place without Grace's contribution. And then last and not least, my colleague Gavin McMahon, who's put together a 5-minute video which celebrates the whole year, which we're not going to watch. Thank you.
Such a fantastic way, and I just want to say thank you to the staff who actually don't do a job. It's a passion and it's like a vocation for them, so I just want to say thank you very, very publicly for them.
Today's event is really important in that the materials that are going to be transcribed today from Carfrain's archive tell the story of what it was like to be a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, both pre and post decriminalisation.
ParaFriend support the queer community here in Northern Ireland. That is a community that is very important to me. This was a great opportunity, both from a personal standpoint and an academic standpoint.
As a volunteer, I think this is important information that needs to be captured, seeing the need that people had to communicate with others in a world where their equality wasn't recognised, and lest we forget it's important that that's recorded.
pictures with the words we weigh, the words we say.
I love the video. I now feel I've seen the PRONI building from every conceivable angle. But I think that gives you a flavour of the breadth of work that goes on here. Although, Stephen, you have intrigued me. Can I be the first journalist to do a documentary about the Hitler letter? So there we were, seeing the work that PRONI does, getting a glimpse, particularly to PRONI bringing the PRONI story up to date, particularly with modern technology. And as we know, technology plays an enormous role in how archives are stored and how they are accessed. And we're constantly learning new methods in terms of accessing those archives and indeed protecting and enhancing them. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Peter Crooks from Trinity College in Dublin. Dr. Crooks is Director of the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland. Dr. Crooks, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good afternoon, everybody. Great pleasure for me to be here today with you for this event. I'm going to begin by feasting literally on archives and with a warning from the deep past about the fate that befalls a messenger who bears an unwelcome message. This is from one of PRONI's most ancient documents. It's, I think, number 2 in the PRONI 100 catalogue, the register of Milo Sweetman, the Archbishop of Armagh. And it's a case from late 1360, so 650 years ago, and a dispute has arisen between the Primate of Armagh and the Priory of Down, which I think is Newtonards. The Archbishop issues a summons, probably a parchment letter, sealed with wax, with the primatial seal stamped on it, to the Prior of Down, demanding his appearance before the Archbishop's court to resolve their dispute. And the Prior, according to the register, quite naturally, he didn't perhaps go on the run, but he certainly made certain not to be home when the letter was to be delivered, summoning him to court. So the Archbishop sent his chaplain to find the Prior. And this didn't end well for the chaplain or for the archival record. When the chaplain tracked down the Prior of Down, he, the chaplain, messenger of the Archbishop, was snatched, beaten, clapped in iron fetters, and forced to eat the Archbishop's words literally, or so we are told in the register. He had to swallow the letter of summons, parchment, wax seal, and all. This is now folio 46 of the paper register, which I think is being lovingly conserved upstairs in the conservation lab. So I start with this to join the celebration with one of PRONI's greatest treasures, one of a number of really priceless treasures in the collection here, and to set up some points I want to make about archives and power and peril, but mostly because this is a selfish plea to be generous to a hapless messenger like me. Stephen asked us to talk about the next 100 years and technology, and we know that this is, as you said, a perilous thing to do. What will the researchers of the future make of what we are doing today? I am a historian. The province of historians is history. It's already happened. It's very safe. We perform post-mortems. We don't prophesy or prognosticate. And even when we conduct an historical autopsy, we rarely, as historians, agree on what happened, still less why, and nor should we. History is an unstable, continuing argument which may move us slowly towards understanding. All of this is to say that historians can't reliably explain the future, even when the future has already happened. So why have I been asked to speak to you today? Well, with that professional caveat entered, I think I can respond in the spirit of the introduction to say that there are things that are going on and have been going on in this place for the last century that should inform the future and the next 100 years. And that's really what I want to celebrate. So I'm now going to perform maybe not autopsy, but an unqualified live archival vivisection. In a sense, while the future may be unknowable, in another sense, the future is now. PRONI's centenary falls at precisely one of the great inflection points, a great tipping point in archival history between the analog and the digital. And that's what we have to confront. We are now in the information revolution. We're not waiting for it. This will be understood in retrospect as being as significant a moment as the first great archival moment of the 19th century, when a new systematic and professionalized attitude to public records took hold. And in Britain and Ireland, it was more widespread, but in Britain and Ireland, it gave us in 1838 in London and 1867 in Dublin, and then in 1923-4 in Belfast, recognizably modern archives. And in the wake of those archives, a professional, archivally grounded university discipline of historical inquiry. So in other words, my discipline is the offspring of your discipline. It's an exciting time, the now, the present, to be a practitioner of anything involving the digital. And speaking personally, it is always a privilege, an inspiring privilege, to benefit from the combination of rigor and public service that I take to be the core ethos of this archive. The digital potential is vast. We are currently able to open up directly access to core archival content, breaking through the metadata, as it were, and bring this material, handwritten records previously untranscribed, to a globally dispersed but tightly coordinated community of researchers. In this sense, PRONI is here in Titanic Quarter, but it is now global. Artificial intelligence is enabling us to recognize and transcribe handwritten text on a scale that was actually unimaginable not 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but 3 or 4 years ago. That's how fast things are moving. But there is, of course, a dark side. It is a precarious digital future. And I'm not just referring to the hallucinations and fakery of generative AI, nor even the fact that the robots may be coming for us. It's the more fundamental anxiety of the archive in the digital age, which turns on the question of half-life and shelf life, obsolescence and scale. Electronic records are incredibly fragile. Data decays remarkably rapidly, and there is so much of it already and coming. If you think back to that unfortunate messenger of the Primate of Armagh and his wax seal and all, that is what I would describe as a decidedly chewy but robust medium of communication. Petabytes of data, by comparison, can disappear before we have even finished chewing. So that's the context, that's the dark side in which we have to operate. And what I want to offer are 3 telegraphed thoughts about how we might think differently about this future and its ephemerality. These are questions of how and who and what, and I may get a word in on why. So firstly, let's rethink the how. What I'm thinking of here is, how do we respond to the digital? We have, I think, become too accustomed to using disaster metaphors whenever the digital is mentioned. We hear of tsunamis of information, or as the Oxford librarian at the Bodleian, Richard Ovenden, puts it, the digital deluge. By implication, when tsunamis and deluges are coming, we pine for the antediluvian. But I think the language of catastrophe is not appropriate. It suggests overwhelm and that we can't cope. I think if there's an informational surge coming, then the collective task is surely to harness its extraordinary latent power and channel it. Don't think of deluge, think of hydroelectric power. The archive is the ideal conduit to do that channeling and lead out on this at a societal level, because the archive has always been about turning chaos into order and structure. In the 1830s, before we had a public record office anywhere, that meant bringing before the House of Commons in Westminster the skeletons of the rats that were discovered in the mouldering record vaults of London, where the vermin had been feasting on the decaying parchment to make the point that a public record office was needed. The rat, you may think, died in a good cause. to be a little reductive, it gave us the 1838 Public Record Act, and with a hop or two of history, DA Charts Act to create PRONI in 1923. Now, we're not far off 2 centuries later, and we need to reconfigure our thinking so that the archive is not imagined as facing off with or facing down even technology and the digital. Instead, we need to be confident that the archive is, always has been, a technology. This building, you, the professional staff, the catalogues, the hand lists, the indexes, the reading rooms, the call slips, the desktops, the preservation labs, the conservation studio, the kilometers of storage, the environmental conditions, the fire safety, these are all a vast information retrieval machine that reduced chaos into structure and order. The archive has nothing to fear, I believe, and everything to contribute in terms of the mechanisms that are required to tame the unstructured, fluid electronic data of the next century and turn it into something that can be channeled and preserved and reliably retrieved. So that's the how. The archive is a technology. Second point is the archivist as curator and collector. Here, as with my first point, I'm encouraging you to hold fast to the eternal verities of the archive. PRONI, in its foundational decades, and more recently, was famously proactive in building its collection. We heard that a moment ago. From nothing, it's created 3 million records and built history in that sense, ensuring that posterity's researchers could pursue questions that were, at the time the collection was created, unthought and unposed. My worry about the vast digital accessioning of state records, state administrative records in the future, is that the archive, with all due respect to officials, becomes synonymous with the official record, merely being a reflection of the official mind. We have to continue to ensure, and we saw excellent examples of this even in the video, that the researchers of the future can pursue questions about society at large. We need active curation, activist collection, society-wide digital preservation initiatives led by professionals from within the sector. That's what the historians in my profession need of your professional skills. So that's the archive as technology and the archivist as activist, the how and the who. So what about the what? Here my point is simple. The archive will remain 100 years hence still a material thing. It will be a physical embodied space. It will be a community of researchers and citizens, of citizen researchers, of research for society. All these things will continue. Digital and physical archives are not in opposition to each other. Digitization has brought more people into direct contact with ancient records than at any point in the past. And it's happened incredibly rapidly and will continue to happen. Electronic records are in themselves physical media. They have embodiments and they have to be preserved. And in a data-saturated PRONI of 2124, the centerpieces of the on-site exhibition that the public service team will then present will be the fascinating physical artifacts in PRONI's collection, by then 700 or 800 years old, some of them, written on, can you believe it, paper, an unknown quantity for most students in the 22nd century, written by hand, can you imagine it, with ink using quills. This will be a matter of complete fascination. But it's not just a sort of relic status that these documents will have. In the field of historical research, the history of the book, the social history of the archive, the global history of media and information and communication, these are dynamic fields opening themselves up in the present moment, responding to the digital, but bringing the long history of communication and records to bear upon it. So these artifacts that PRONI maintains, these kilometers of storage, must continue to be championed so that the future researchers can feast intellectually upon the archival record as artifact. Finally, why? Stephen posed to me the question, is the archive the last line of defense against misinformation. Stephen Scarth, that is. Well, perhaps, but maybe not in the way the question implies. The truth is, and I hope this doesn't shock anybody present, that archives are full of fiction. They're full of misinformation, even disinformation. There are dodgy dossiers and silenced and suppressed voices. There are gender gaps and silences in the archive. Archives have viewpoints that are frequently aloof and elite, and most of the society, most of the time, despite the scale of what we have, is reduced to, if it's lucky, statistical summary. As with W.H. Auden's Ode to the Unknown Citizen, quote, his health card shows he was once in a hospital, but left it cured. No name. The key point is that archives enable researchers not just to find the truth, but to sift and assemble for themselves, to assess fidelity and accuracy, to adjust for bias, to interrogate critically, and in a true sense, to hold accountable the truth claims made by the records themselves. In short, archives enable research. It's a symbiosis. And this is a critical attitude to inquiry that is critically important at this point in the world. In that sense, I think the archive plays a vital role, not in establishing the truth in the records, but in establishing what the authentic record is. Nothing could be more vital in the contemporary moment. So my closing thought is to think of the archive as an essential pillar of civic society. I think the archive is a sort of fifth estate, far more worthy of that name and status than the degraded but vaunted new media that pollute so much of our contemporary discourse. So with that happy thought, I'll close. I hope this provokes some useful thinking. I will be happy to eat my own words in the discussion, except for this final sentence, which is to salute PRONI and to congratulate you all and the staff on the achievements of a centenary. I want to thank all PRONI staff who've helped me and my colleagues in the project I've had the privilege of directing for the last several years, the virtual Record Treasury. You have been incredible people to work with. And I wish you every success for your public service and collaborations in the next century. I hope to be invited back. I mightn't make PRONI 200, but I'll be 93 for PRONI 150. I may arrive by hover craft, and I might need special access, but I will want to see a physical document. Perhaps somebody could add a note to the file. Thank you very much.
Peter, thanks very much indeed for that entertaining talk. There are two takeaways that I instantly think of, one serious and one flippant. The serious one is that the archive is a pillar of society and that we are now in an information revolution. The flippant one is that eating parchment and wax seal is definitely not to be recommended and is certainly not part of your 5 a day. So thank you for that. We're going to stay with Dublin. We were hoping to be joined by Orla McBride, the director of the National Archives of Ireland, but sadly her train fell victim to the snow. So she is hopefully going to join us on Zoom. And Orla, are you there?
Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 projects today that I've been asked to speak about specifically, and that is number 1, the National Centre for Research and Remembrance, which the National Archives is establishing. The second is the Census of 1926, which is the first census of the Irish Free State, that we will release in 2026. And the third is our digital transformation strategy, leading on from much of the discussion that Peter presented to us earlier. So the National Archives is, as we like to call it, the keeper of the state's memory for current and future generations. The scope of the archives that are preserved in the National Archives, they're the records of departments of state, so that's government ministries, including the courts, 61 additional organisations, which we call scheduled bodies, surviving holdings of the Public Record Office of Ireland and the State Paper Office, committees, commissions of tribunals or inquiries, and then we have private records. So in effect, we have in our holdings about 50 million records across 2 sites, and we'll have a third site in Dublin, which will open in 2027. And our role really in 2024, we see it as being critical to managing the contemporary records of government and the role we play really in centralised records management, policies and procedures across government in terms of disposal, retentions, and then ultimately the transfer of records. Now I'm going to talk about the National Centre, and unfortunately I can't show you anything, which is very disappointing, but I shall continue. So a number of years ago, the state established the Mother and Baby Home Commission of Investigation into mother and baby homes in Ireland. And arising out of that report, the government took a decision that they would create a new National Centre for Research and Remembrance that would have an archive part of it, but would also have a museum. It would have also further education, social housing, and would be sited in the centre of Dublin in what is Sean McDermott Street in an old well, there used to be a laundry there, but in an old convent. So the National Archives was charged with responsibility to develop, as part of the National Centre, an archive that would house the records relating to institutional trauma in the broadest sense, covered in that would be the records relating to mother and baby homes, Magdalen laundries, industrial schools, and boarded out children. There's a steering group that's overseen by government, and then there are a number of subcommittees. So the National Archives has been leading out on the archive element of it, and initially we're looking specifically at records that fall under our statutory remit. So those are records that are over 30 years old, that are held across government departments and related agencies that relate to mother and baby homes, Magdalen laundries, boarded out children, industrial schools, etc. There are obviously a large volume of records that are in private institutions, namely the religious orders, that do not fall under the National Archives. So currently we're working with government in relation to legislation that will enable records that fall outside of the National Archives legislation, but also fall outside of because we're 30 years and then 20 years that fall outside of that timeline, to become part of this new National Centre. So the centre, the centre is going to planning now this year, and we anticipate that will open in 2027. So we're working very closely with all the government departments, as well as the Adoption Authority of Ireland, the Health Service, TUSLA, which is the Child and Family Agency, and the local government, who would have had responsibility for many of the laundries, etc., but also for boarded out children. And we've been working with them to identify what are the records that exist out there, the volume of records, so that they then can move into the National Archives over time. So we've conducted an audit across every government department and with the different agencies of the state. We're currently focusing only on records that fall within our statutory remit that are over 30 years old. And ultimately, all of those records, including ones that are below 30 years, will transfer into the National Centre once a piece of new legislation has been created that will enable those records to transfer. So currently we're working with the Attorney General Office, particularly looking at records that would have, from a GDPR perspective, personal information, identifiable information, so that those records would transfer into the centre, but access would only be provided to people who that they relate to, or family members, etc. So we hope that as this year and next year progress, that the records will begin to transfer across to us. As part of the project, there's a large digitisation element to it, because ultimately people will want access to records, and we're specifically thinking of the large diaspora who may have been affected by mother and baby homes, Magdalen laundries, etc. So there's a large digitisation element planned to provide access to survivors to records who are living abroad. So we're currently looking at changes in technology that's used to deal with different types of formats, etc. We're looking at copyright, looking at digital images, legacy digitization, then the transfer of existing kind of digitized surrogates that exist out there, and then looking at the access arrangements from a legal perspective to ensure that people can access their records. So without being able to show you my screen, I can't really go through the plans that I had and the different examples of records. So I'm going to move on now to our second project that I've been asked to speak about, which is Census 1926. And this is the first census of the Irish Free State. And in accordance with the Statistics Act of 1993, public access to census records can be available and can be made available after the elapse of a period of 100 years. So Census 1926 has about 1 million sheets that are in the National Archives, and they are part of, they're in returns that are laced in 2,400 portfolios from 26 counties. There are two different types. We have Form A, which was the household returns, and then Form B, which are the house and the building returns for each town, land or street. The pieces, this census is interesting from our perspective, different to 1901 and 1911, in that, first of all, people could fill out Census 1926 as Gaeilge in Irish. Secondly, for the first time, people would put down who their employer was. So we get a much better sense of where people were employed, how people were employed, but who the employers were in Ireland in 1926. And the other interesting element of Census 1926 is that people also had to give information and details in relation to the total area and statute acres of any agricultural holdings that they had that were situated in the Free State. So from our perspective, we started working on it. We've assembled quite a large team and we've begun the process of cataloguing, conserving and digitising what is for us a very high value data set. We're also looking at creating a dynamic and a very user-friendly online platform, which will enable free online access to Census 1926. That's one of the key policy pillars of our government, is that all census records and records relating to 1901, 1911 and 1926 are free online, so they're not behind any paywall. We have commitments in relation to open data regulations and government commitments in relation to accessing records freely. We're also looking at creating advanced functionality across 1926 census that will speak to the data sets of 1901 and 1911. So we're working with IT companies looking at data dissemination software to enable those searches across multiple data sets. And then we're also developing quite a significant public engagement project that will enable, I suppose, will build up interest in the release of the 1926 census. So from our perspective, we've been looking at ICT, we're looking at cataloguing, conservation, digitisation, transcription, and then ultimately the release of it. So the cataloguing has begun across the 2,400 books. We're also data cleansing 1901 and 1911. And as part of the cataloguing, we've built in a quality assurance and validation of all the data. One of the biggest elements of it is actually the conservation and looking at workflows that will reduce time spent in prepping for digitisation, but will also ensure that there's no damage done to any of the records, so they can withstand the high-speed scanning process, which we've spent quite a significant amount of money on machine technology to enable that. Digitisation has started, and we've installed an IBML. It's a high volume scanner and network environment. As I say, the QC and the validation stations and licenses have all been set up post and pre-scanning. We've barcoded every single book to enable an easier workflow. And then in terms of image types, we're looking at JPEGs 400 DPI and TIFFs at 400 DPI. And from a technology perspective, one of the most interesting things for us is really looking at the transcription and the robotic process automation that we've brought in. So we're working with Deloitte and we are creating a software model for transcription of the 1926 census. And we're training the models on predetermined rules, because we're quite lucky that 1901 and 1911, surnames, names, townlands, etc., probably don't change so much between 1911 and 1926. So we're able to use and pre-populate fields using sample data and metadata. So we're refining at the moment the models as part of the QA process, and then we will go live with our bots. That we have about 10 bots that will be working on the transcription process, and then we're obviously training up our own staff. And then as part of the platforming of the census, we're building the platform, but as I say, it will be built on a relational database, so it will be able to speak to the 1901, 1911. So people will be able to across the different data sets, look for families, look for the number of teachers in a particular townland in 1901 as opposed to in 1926, etc. So that data dissemination software has been developed now to enhance the functionality, and it will all become live for 2026. And it will allow, from our perspective, the system should support longitudinal studies across the different censuses. So that's really important for us. And then we're also looking at how we might link the census data to other public and open source data sets. So, for example, the Ordnance Survey, mapping, the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage, etc. So that's, I suppose, from our perspective, it's one of the most interesting legacy projects that has come out of the decade of centenaries, which was all about the establishment, obviously, of the Free State. And now this is the first manifestation, really, of what Ireland, the country that emerged out of the War of Independence and the Civil War, how it began then to establish itself. And from our perspective, the 1926 census was very much about planning for that new state. So that will be released on the 18th of April, 2026. And my final project that I want to talk about very, very briefly is around digital transformation. And Peter spoke to this, really. It is one of the most exciting elements of what we do in the National Archives. So we've commissioned a digital roadmap for the National Archives. And as part of that, a digital preservation strategy. We're looking at system options at the moment and requirements for the accessioning, the ingestion, the storage, the preservation, and the production of born digital records. And we're working with our own Department of Public Expenditure and Reform and the Office of the Chief Information Officer. So the key challenges that we see in the whole digital sphere are around volumes, the sheer volumes of digital records. Peter spoke about a tsunami. We're actually talking about petabytes of data. So it's really, really complex in terms of even the storage of, and there's a new data centre being built by the Irish government just outside of Dublin, and we've been identified as being one of the core anchors of that data centre, just in terms of our digital repository. Peter spoke about the susceptibility to obsolescence in terms of technology always changing, born digital records requiring, additional hardware, software for their content, etc. So that's a huge challenge. The transfer mechanism, successful digital preservation and access, has to be a really collaborative process between the record creator and then the archive. And then obviously, from our perspective, the resourcing and the skills and the knowledge for our staff to be able to operate within this new digital environment, but also supporting government departments in terms of having the infrastructure to enable the transfer piece to happen. So from our perspective, we're at the moment writing the digital preservation business case and submitting that to Dublin, or to DEPR, which is our Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. We're piloting a process at the moment with selected transferring bodies. We're engaging with our Chief Information Officer on the data centre. We're looking at infrastructure infrastructure design for the long-term storage solution. We're also developing strategic digital preservation solutions, looking at resourcing, integration with our build-to-share systems across government, and then integration of the Born Digital with our archive catalogue and our DAM system. So in effect, really, across Census 1926, across our digital preservation strategy and our digital preservation roadmap, and then in relation to the National Centre for Research and Remembrance, ultimately, we are the National Archives, but we have to evolve in terms of how we can adapt to changing technologies and the use of technology to enable people to access the records of state and enable us to preserve those records in terms of long-term preservation. I leave it there. My sincere apologies that nobody could actually see my slides, but I'll leave it there, and I don't think I can come in later as part of the Q&A, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Orla, thanks very much indeed. The snow stopped you being here physically, but it certainly didn't stop your message. So if you can hear us in Belfast, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your quick thinking of jumping on Zoom rather than the Enterprise. So you battled the weather and the Wi-Fi, and we certainly appreciate you being on the line, so thank you very much. In the world of archives, as we've already heard, working together and working collaboratively is really important. It's really crucial. And that's the theme of our next talk from Jim O'Hagan, the Chief Executive of Libraries Northern Ireland. Jim.
Thank you for the introduction, and thanks to David and the team here at PRONI for the invitation. It's great to be part of today's celebration, so thank you very much for that. Okay, making collections, records and documents accessible to the public is an essential aspect of what we're all here to do. My short presentation, as Stephen has said, is about collaboration and engagement, and through the lens of libraries to provide a perspective on the role it can play in the future of archives. I'd like to begin by providing a short introduction to Libraries NI, as this will add some context to the presentation. Libraries NI is the public library service for Northern Ireland. We are the largest single library authority in the UK and indeed on the island of Ireland. Our statutory mandate is to provide a comprehensive and efficient public library service for people living, working or studying in Northern Ireland. Library services are free and are used by people of all ages and backgrounds. They are delivered through a network of 98 branch libraries, heritage libraries, mobile libraries, and a home call service, which provide a wide range of services to communities and people across Northern Ireland. Libraries offer a network of welcoming, safe, and accessible community hubs. Local libraries are designed to deliver modern and effective services for people of all ages. Each library features areas for children and adults, comfortable seating, Wi-Fi access, computer suites, and meeting areas. Libraries are vibrant community spaces, providing focal points for many people to meet locally, including parents and carers, students, retired and older people, and younger people. We deliver services and programs that matter to people, communities, and government, including employability workshops, mental health programs, parenting activities, literacy, education, digital inclusion, and much more, as well as access to online resources, ebooks, and e-magazines. As digital, online, and social media continue to play an increasing role in the service delivery model, the digital inclusion and IT services offered by libraries can be an important part of the access and support infrastructure for people wishing to engage with wider audiences. Libraries provide the perfect environment for people to begin to learn about IT and the internet at their own pace and without fear, in a relaxed environment with experienced staff on hand to offer help and support. Libraries offer technology-enabled services, including self-service kiosks, digital hubs, and printing, scanning, Wi-Fi, and broadband and free computer access for library members available in every public library. Meeting rooms are available in most libraries, offering presentation equipment or whiteboards, which provide the perfect environment for organisations to use as venues where they can reach customers within their own local community. We also have an extensive range of resources that are of benefit to historians, researchers, genealogists, students, and those who have an interest in cultural and community life past and present. The main heritage collections are located in Armagh, Ballymena, Belfast Central Library, Derry Central Library, Downpatrick, Enniskillen, Newry, and in the Mellon Centre for Migration Studies. In short, libraries are safe, welcome, and inclusive spaces. We work with many great partner organisations, some of which are highlighted on this slide. These organisations have fantastic people. We have fantastic people working for us in libraries, and so it is not surprising when we work together, often we get fantastic results and outcomes. This is the essence of collaboration and engagement, achieving more together. Collaboration and working together brings benefits. Fresh perspectives and thinking are brought together, learning and experience is shared, access to expert knowledge and experience is increased, opportunities for further collaboration open up, connections are made, relationships built, networks established, and silos broken down. Customer reach can be extended, services are made more accessible, duplication and costs can be reduced, and best practice service delivery approaches can be adopted and developed. These benefits can equally be applied whether we are delivering services through more conventional approaches or online and digitally, or through a mixture of both. Collaboration and partnership working also brings challenges. What are the respective needs and expectations of partner organisations? What can each partner offer or deliver? Collaboration and partnership working is not offloading. Setting boundaries, parameters, and understanding are all important. Capacity, capability, resilience, particularly in light of resource pressures and constraints, whether that's staffing or financial, are important considerations. Data management, data security, data sharing creates risk and adds further complications. This is particularly relevant in the digital world that we currently operate within. Operating in an increasingly complex environment where the digital world and the physical world interact and overlap will bring new opportunities, but also will bring new challenges. Within this new landscape, there are many things for us to consider, and some of these have already been mentioned by Peter and Orna. Artificial intelligence, fake news, authentication, intellectual property, competitors. All of these things, I think, are considerations for us in this space. And I want to focus on one or two specific examples from this slide to provide some insight into how collaboration and engagement can work in practice. In this regard, I will talk about the BFI replay service, which is a good example of collaboration and engagement between Libraries NI and the British film industry. The BFI replay service is a free streaming service for public libraries with thousands of digitised videos and television programmes from the collections of the BFI National Archive and UK Regions and Nations film archives, alongside contributions from other significant archives such as the BBC and ITV. Free access to the BFI replay is available in Northern Ireland only through Libraries NI's network of libraries. So this joint venture provides additional services and resources through the library network. It adds to the library service offering, helping attract visitors to libraries. It allows BFI extensive reach into local communities across Northern Ireland. It allows the BFI replay service to be provided in a safe and managed environment. It provides safeguards in relation to protection of intellectual property rights. And there are experienced library staff there to support and help people engage with the service. On today, as we celebrate PRONI 100, it would be remiss of me not to mention the great work we have been doing with David and Gillian and the team at PRONI, where exhibitions comprising unique and original archives and records have been touring a number of libraries, and we've seen that reflected in the video earlier. This has provided the opportunity for local communities to see original historical records up close in their local library, reaching new audiences, creating local interest, and signposting people to the wider resources and collections held by PRONI. In other words, highlighting the treasures that PRONI holds here. We used our networks of communication and social media channels to promote the events, and library staff were on hand to help support and curate the exhibitions. This has proved to be a very successful venture, which I believe has opened the door to future opportunity for collaboration and engagement. What libraries bring to collaboration, engagement and partnership can be summarised as a customer base across Northern Ireland, a network of libraries, experienced friendly staff, welcoming safe and inclusive spaces, regional and local communication channels, getting your message out, broadband and Wi-Fi access, including support to get online, and a wide range of library resources, meeting rooms and computer suites. So, some final thoughts on collaboration and engagement and the future of archives. With regard to archives of the future, digital will undoubtedly play a key role, and we've heard so much about that already today. However, it will not be exclusively digital and online, and it is difficult to envisage people not remaining interested and intrigued by original collections, archives, and documents. And again, Peter alluded to this. He wants to go back and touch the documents and feel the documents. We have seen this in the world of libraries, where there are many electronic resources, e-books, audiobooks, etc. available. But we still find that people remain drawn to the tactile nature of a conventional book. Connecting, I think, is important. I suspect that in reality, the future of archives is a blended or hybrid future, where online and more conventional approaches will form part of the service model, providing access to collections will not fit all, and multi-delivery channels and approaches will be essential to success. Collaboration and engagement will play a role for organisations, and the slide sets out a summary of points to consider. I suppose where I would place some emphasis is that when embarking on joint ventures, it is important that to work with like-minded organisations and to look for natural synergies. I believe that collaboration and engagement between the right partners will be an essential part of the future of archives, and in making archives, records and collections more relevant, accessible and interesting to wider audiences. I hope this short presentation has given you a flavour of and an insight to collaboration and engagement that we do in Libraries NI, and of the benefits that can arise from partnership working and collaboration. We really can achieve more together. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Graham, thanks very much indeed. I spotted the figure of 98. It would be lovely to get it to 100, since we're talking about 100, which is the end number at the moment. But 98 is a very healthy figure, and I was certainly struck by that. I'm struck by the fact that, you know, you do more than simply lend books, and you work collaboratively, not just with PRONI, as you were talking about, but obviously with the BFI, which I found particularly interesting. Now, talking of PRONI, our final speaker is a familiar face to you if you've been to these events before. David Huddleston is the acting director here. David, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me at the back okay? Great, thank you. Just accept my own welcome on behalf of the staff of the Public Record Office to you all today in the audience. Thank you for joining us. Before I look forward to the future of archives, I'm going to go back as well, not as far back as Peter went back, only back to the 1920s, back to March 1924, and the opening of the new Public Record Office, led by PRONI's first director and deputy keeper, pictured here, David A. Chart. They obviously were much more formal in terms of their attire back then. I could maybe be persuaded about that. These are some comments that he made, taken from some of his own papers that are on deposit here. He felt that Ulster had a very unique and special history that needed to be preserved. And interestingly, particularly on the province of Ulster, it was consistently at the forefront of events. Its legends are richer, more detailed and earlier. People from other provinces may take a different view on that, but that was David Chart's. In setting out his vision for PRONI, Dr. Chart said he wanted more than merely a store passively receiving such documents as came to it. Instead, he hoped it would become a means of gathering information and collating knowledge, of making access easy by lucid arrangement, and the provision of well-planned indexes. It was Dr. Chart and his successors who laid the groundwork for what PRONI has become today as the custodian of the archives, and offering access to thousands of important collections, each with its own unique history and story. So today, as we come together in this magnificent Public Record Office of Northern Ireland building, we cannot help but imagine the pride that Dr. Chart would surely have had in how PRONI has developed as the National Archive for Northern Ireland in its role of preserving and encouraging active participation in the archives. As we continue to uphold Dr. Chart's vision and expand upon it, we will do so with the same passion and dedication that drove him as we seek to address the digital and paper record challenges that we face in the 21st century. So PRONI will continue its statutory duty to gather information, collate knowledge, and make access easy for a wide range of researchers, whether they be family, local, academic, business, legal, or creative. There is another noted public historian who would have had much to contribute to the PRONI centenary and is greatly missed. And you'll see him here, Dr. Eamon Phoenix, speaking from this podium a few years ago in one of the many videos that we have up on our YouTube. Dr. Eamon Phoenix was dedicated to the cause of connecting our society with its history by engaging, informing, and inspiring people from all backgrounds and walks of life. It was his deeply held conviction that understanding the past was essential to moving forward as a society, and this was the driving force behind his quest to make history accessible to everyone. He left a profound legacy about the importance of archives and the contribution that archives can make in helping us know ourselves as well as each other. The future of archives will be fortunate to see historians and researchers who follow in the footsteps of Eamon Phoenix. These students will be people of all ages and abilities who want to get involved. Archives in the future will be enriched by the next generation, emulating Dr. Phoenix and fostering a spirit of cross-community understanding and providing a way to bring people together. And I'm delighted that Eamon's family are setting up a foundation to sustain his legacy, and PRONI looks forward to working with the foundation. So in looking to the future, we'll be guided by the recommendations and priorities for PRONI following an independent review completed by Deloitte on behalf of the Department for Communities. This helped crystallise key issues for the organisation in the delivery of our statutory role. One of the biggest external threats relates to the future transfer and management of born digital public records, and particularly those created by Northern Ireland departments and the wider public sector. And I know I've used the term threat, Peter, and there'll be a few more sort of archive bingo that will probably come along for you. So just to move on. So these are not obviously digital public records. These are the files that I suppose represent the past of public record keeping and the way we've handled records for many, many years. Really a similar way over the last 100 years, probably would be recognizable to DA chart. But digital is the future. The good management, transfer, preservation, and making available of born digital public records will be a key part of our activities as we work in collaboration to agree standards, processes, and protocols to ensure the proper administration of the born digital public record of the future. This is a challenge facing national archives across the world, and it will be essential to share learning and experience as we work together to tackle the volume of the digital records tsunami. Yes, I've said it, it's there. There is definitely this in terms of volume. This work will help support accountability and transparency. The future digital public record is the evidence and information required by historians, researchers, and journalists. The future archives have a significant role in guarding against misinformation and disinformation in what some commentators are referring to as a digital dark age. There is now so much digital content available that the role of librarians, curators, archivists, records managers, I would argue, will be even more important in maintaining trust and ethical underpinning in our collections. PRONI holds collections of local, national, and international significance. As we look to the future, there are lots of exciting opportunities to open up archives, making important connections, and in realising the greater public value of archives. And the Department for Communities is developing culture, arts, and heritage strategy. And this will provide a strategic focus and framework for PRONI to ensure that archives play a central role in delivery across the wider sector. As you know, archives provide the source material inspiration for novels, dramas, and documentaries. And I expect to see even greater usage and appreciation of the voices that are revealed through the exploration of archives online and on site. I'm just going to pick on a couple of examples. Recent examples are Lucy Caldwell's award-winning book These Days, set in Belfast during the Blitz, and drawing on her extensive research in the diaries of Emma Duffin, and Emma Duffin's diaries feature in the PRONI 100 publication that's available today. And another one is AJ West, the spirit engineer based on archival research, and Professor William Crawford, and is now being turned into a film drama supported by Northern Ireland Screen. Others have already commented on the opportunities provided by new technology for researchers and customers. User expectations continue to evolve. Our citizens expect access to information at speed, and often they are prepared to pay for it. PRONI will continue to look at revenue generating opportunities, exploring options for developing new services via commercial partnerships. We do need to do more research with citizens and stakeholders to ensure we are providing the services that meet their needs. Similarly, we need the evidence that what we are doing is having a real value and impact on society. So archives as evidence. We know that the community in Northern Ireland has been severely impacted by the Troubles, and that work is ongoing to address the legacy of the past. And PRONI is playing a crucial role through making available archives as a vitally important source of evidence to redress schemes and supporting victims and survivors of historical institutional abuse and individuals injured physically or psychologically through the conflict. In this picture, we have Deirdre Mahon in the centre, and Dr. Maeve O'Rourke and Professor Phil Scraton at the launch of the Truth Recovery panel report back in 2021. And this links in with some of Orla's remarks about the National Centre for Research and Remembrance. In addition, societal and government failures relating to mother and baby institutions, Magdalen laundries and workhouses will form a significant part of PRONI's future work. This requires the identification, cataloguing and preservation of archives that will assist survivors in the search for truth and understanding and support the important work of the current independent panel and the future public inquiry that will be established. Archives are vitally important in helping to uncover forgotten pasts and in strengthening an individual's sense of identity and well-being. A friend who has adopted recently shared with me the information they received from a social worker relating to their birth and subsequent adoption a half a century ago. This was clearly a profound and important glimpse into their past, providing vital information about their birth parents and events that they knew nothing about. This brought home to me in a very personal way the importance of record keeping and the ongoing role that records play in people's lives. Archive staff will need new skills and knowledge to understand human rights, understand the impact of trauma, and to be able to signpost to support services that are available. And equally, staff will need the appropriate level of support and training to deal with and work with people going through that experience. The range of customers using archives is becoming increasingly diverse, and that reflects the fantastic work being delivered by PRONI with a wide range of partners to break down barriers with communities who felt underrepresented. And this needs to be delivered in a more regular and sustainable way in the future, and not just via short-term projects. Environmental sustainability and climate change are key considerations for archives, looking at passive storage. PRONI has taken important steps to reduce energy consumption in the archive stores here, whilst carefully monitoring temperature and relative humidity. Innovation City Belfast Partnership, of which Belfast City Council is a member, has exciting plans to see Queen's Island on a high-level carbon reduction pathway for both heat and electricity within the next decade. And this is an opportunity for PRONI to move to carbon net zero on this site. Shared storage solutions across galleries, libraries, museums, and archives will be progressed as a part of a more sustainable future. I think every presentation is better with Seamus Heaney included. So this is another PRONI 100 document or record. This is taken from the UTV archive. So in terms of the future for archives, partnerships will remain key, which Jim has already spoken about, as have others. This image is a still of Charles Witherspoon, or Charlie Witherspoon, one of Ulster Television's most recognisable and endearing presenters, with a young Seamus Heaney, taken from 1966, just after the publication of The Death of a Naturalist. And if you haven't watched the clip, please do watch it. It's absolutely fascinating to hear Seamus reflecting on the inspiration and the meaning, and he does then read one of his poems, The Waterfall. This original film was one of hundreds digitised with funding from the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland in Dublin and the Department for Communities here, in partnership with PRONI, NI Screen and ITV, to preserve the UTV archive and make it publicly available, ensuring long-term preservation and access to some of UTV's earliest film footage. other established partnerships, such as that with Ulster University and the Conflict Archive on the Internet, and new ones, such as our Heritage, Our Stories with the University of Glasgow, provide exciting opportunities for cross-sectoral collaboration. I just want to finish with the importance of education and the contribution archives can make to children at primary school, exploring the world around them, to lifelong learners developing new skills. 50 years ago, PRONI was leading the field in the production of facsimile packs. Some of you may well remember those facsimile packs containing photocopies of documents relating to topics such as the 1798 rebellion, the United Irishmen, opening up the use of original source material to 17 and 18-year-olds. They were still being used in the late 1980s when I was doing my A-levels. That's when PRONI probably first entered my consciousness. And this is an image just of children at St Eugene's Primary School up in Derry, when Grace and colleagues and Gillian and others and Alba from our conservation team took some of the original records, took the original registers from St Eugene's School and allowed the children to actually view those, see some of the names, the streets. This is the school that Mark McGuinness went to, Jerry Anderson, and other notable individuals from North, such as virtual reality that would allow students to have an even greater understanding of the past as they experience a virtual reconstruction based on original sources. Check out the Ulster University Island McGee Witch Trials website or the Virtual Record Treasury to see what can be achieved. This is vitally important work, and PRONI will need to extend its capacity and capability in terms of educational outreach, working with partners and taking a strong digital focus to inspire learning experiences. None of this is possible without a skilled workforce. The training and development of staff, new skills in relation to preservation, conservation, access and cataloguing, or areas such as marketing, engagement, and IT are all essential. And we need to look at areas like apprenticeships and other pathways for those seeking a rewarding career within archives. Archives will continue to have an important role as we move into the digital age. As it's already been said, they can help make connections, contribute to a sense of community, bringing us together as volunteers or citizen researchers. So in conclusion, as we look to the future PRONI, it will need to build strategic networks, work with partners across government to secure digital records, develop relationships with new and varied communities of researchers, and deliver new services locally and internationally. And I just have one final request, that you would all join us in being advocates and champions for archives in the 21st century. Thank you.
David, thanks very much indeed. You win the award for the longest name of name checks. What do we have? Mark McGuinness, Seamus Heaney, and Eamon Phoenix. So a great triumvirate there. And I'm pleased and delighted that you mentioned Eamon Phoenix. It's very hard not to think of him every time I come in this building, because I interviewed him many times, particularly when I was doing the archives in the summer and at Christmas. So thank you very much for remembering him. So a lot of things have been discussed this afternoon, and what I'd like to do now is we're going to have a brief discussion. If I could ask Jim and Peter and David to come forward. Peter, let's start with you first, since you're sitting beside me.
Sure.
Technology ever-changing, using your experience at Trinity, when it comes to record keeping and preservation, is it a help or a hindrance?
Well, this one. Is this one?
Can you hear at the back? Just about the bottom.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, there we are. Is it a help or a hindrance? Well, I was trying to hint that some people might wish that it would go away, so that would suggest that it could be a hindrance, but it is the new reality. So we have to make it something that's going to help us. That's the way to think about it. I think we're probably sometimes over worried. That's what I was trying to get at, about the instability of the digital assets themselves. It's true what I was saying about the ephemerality of the digital. Everybody understands that. But on the other hand, the basic technologies of open access, web architecture and file formats and so on have in fact been stable for many decades now. So what is new is not the kind of the structures of the formats, so much as the expectations of the users and the capacities of institutions to support those kinds of new technical infrastructure. So that's where the shift needs to happen. The actual web as a structure is not going to drastically change. It's not that kind of revolution. It's kind of, it's intrusion into everyday life, and therefore a complete shift in expectation.
But if some material isn't digitized and people are reliant on trying to get digital access, there will inevitably be material that they're simply not going to find. And is there a danger of losing out by not turning up physically and going through this in a physical basis?
There is, but I think, well, colleagues from the sector will know more than me, but my impression is of students who I work with, the digital encounter, and the earlier it can happen, the better, the more likely you are to come and physically encounter the documents. So that's what I mean, they're not in opposition to each other. So when I was a student, I often say this, we didn't have the same digital environment. We might have had facsimiles, there were probably been photocopies. So that was as good as it got. But you tended to rely on something else. You tend to rely on lists or published editions or other things. And you might, as a kind of capstone to your work, make archival visits and start exploring. I think that has completely shifted for researching now, where the encounter with the digital brings you into the archive in one way or another much earlier, breaks the kind of resistance that people might have to engaging. Yeah, the fact that, of course, we will only ever digitize a segment of the total archive is really key messaging, so that people don't think that this is all that there is.
David, is that your experience? If you want to pass the microphone to David, is that your experience that it is complementary, that people will look up records digitally and then they'll think, right, I want physically now go to PRONI?
Yeah, I think that is, that is the reality, that, through the catalogue, through online resources, you can take your research to a certain point, but then you actually want, in many instances, to follow that up by visiting an archive, and I suppose that that other material that it isn't available electronically, isn't available online, and that you get the opportunity to actually have that sort of tactile experience. And I like Peter, I would hope that there will still be in 100 years' time that people want to see and look, handle the actual, original record. In terms of the proportion that, we might have digitized within 100 years, I think it'll still be a relatively small proportion. So yeah, we would definitely be encouraging people to come on site into Titanic Quarter and what year will it be, 21, 23, 21, 24, and visit the archives that haven't been digitized. And I think there's something else as well around the interaction, actually coming in, interacting with staff in the search room, with other researchers, that learning from actually that sort of exchange of information. If you're just doing it, online on your own, you lose some of that sort of connection.
And also at times researchers down a particular path will come and say to them, look, you're not having much luck with this. Why don't you try this folder, or why don't you try something else?
Yeah.
Jim, what's your experience with libraries in terms of technology? Are you finding it that it simply makes it easier for you to collaborate with other organizations?
We have probably a different experience in terms of the business model. But I think there are overlapping lessons to perhaps be learned from that. So what do I mean by that? We are in our third iteration of electronic or digital systems to support our business model. It's part of our core infrastructure. We have records of historical interest, and we have a small amount digitized. We have very, very little really digitized by comparison maybe to what's happening in other places. But we do have lots of digital content that is available through the library system. So we have physical paper books, traditional, conventional books, but we also have lots of ebooks, audiobooks, digital books available through a catalogue and acquired and provided through commercial contracts. So what we find is that enables us as a service to engage with different people in different ways. So it broadens access to reading and literacy in our case. And I think that's a kind of a read across for archives that, and I talked in my presentation about the concept of a blended or a hybrid approach. And I think it will continue to be that for many years to come. And I think David's right, that 21, 23 24, people will be coming in and still be using physical records, as they will be coming into libraries and lifting physical books, I suspect, as well.
And do you think it is complementary? So people might do a search digitally and then will think, I'm going to go into the library.
Yes, it's the key point for us is about connecting with people and connecting with reading and literacy and literature. Whenever people are engaging with the service, that is the key and important thing for us. If we were solely relying on people walking through the door and coming in, then there are people who would not simply do that. It's not how they live their lives. We've seen a significant shift in this space through lockdown and COVID. It was one of those kind of disruptive changes that took place in certainly the library world, where we seen physical books, you couldn't physically come in and get your book, but we were able to continue to provide the service to our customers, and people very quickly caught on to that. And the number of borrows and loans from digital books absolutely went through the roof during that period. The downside of that for us is we obviously have to acquire those rights to those books on commercial terms. So that's another issue for us. Maybe not.
As an aside, has the footfall recovered?
Footfall is recovering. We certainly have seen people come back into libraries slower maybe than we would have liked to have seen. We had the cost of living crisis that came up on the heels of COVID-19, and that in a strange way brought people back into libraries, because obviously library services are free and they're warm and safe and welcoming places. But then again, we've had the constrained public sector finances, and that has impacted on us in a way as well. So we're hoping that as we move into the new dispensation, with our Assembly and Executive Bank, again, we will get some stabilisation and funding and get back to more normalised business delivery and get those numbers back to where they should be.
David, Jim mentioned a moment ago, looking to the future. Briefly, what are the big challenges for PRONI when it comes to the future?
Digital records, digital record keeping, particularly the records of government. And there is a huge volume of records that have been accumulating electronically and digitally being created over the last 15 years. So it's going to be ensuring that those are a proportion are transferred to the archive and are available as part of the future public record, future digital public record, how those are preserved, how they're made accessible. It's probably not going to be with the same degree of cataloging and hierarchy that we would like as archivists, but we're going to have to look at different approaches. I think some of the other challenges is going to be around engaging with people. That recovery after COVID that Jim has mentioned. Again, we haven't had, footfall is increasing, but it's not back to the levels that it was. I think we want to build on some of the relationships and partnerships that we have been doing in terms of work with libraries and going out into the community, not expecting people to travel. We don't have a network, unfortunately, like Jim, there's the one building in Belfast. So the challenge, that breaking the perceptions and the barriers about archives. You're familiar with it, Steve, and a lot of the people in this room are, but there's still a lot of people that is the public record office open to the public. It's a space that I can come in and will feel comfortable in and can access the catalogue.
So greater public awareness.
Yes, I think building on the PRONI 100, building on the fantastic work that's been achieved over this last year. I think building that greater public awareness in hand with all of the sort of the challenges and opportunities that digital record keeping that we need to address.
And you talked about the release of documents, and we have seen speedier release of documents, because it used to be annual, and now
it's twice, and we're moving from a 30-year rule to a 20-year rule.
Will that pick up again, do you think? Will that change again?
You could be, if it's going to be digital transfers, you could look at more regular releases. It doesn't have to be 2 key events. It could be happening every quarter. The National Archives UK have done more regular releases over the course of the year. So it may not be the way that Eamon would have covered that big end of year release. Actually, would be a more regular flow of information. And I think because of the volume, it probably will have to be like that. It can't be sort of once or twice a year. It will be an ongoing. there's probably more for your sector, Stephen, how journalists will interrogate that information, how they will make that accessible to the public and researchers as well as another element to that. But yes, I think there will be a more regular release of digital information in the future.
Peter, just finally, I know you're keen to talk about your work, particularly on an all-island basis. Tell us about that.
Well, so the Virtual Record Treasury is an all-island partnership, all-island and international. So it's north and south, it's east and west, it's Ireland and the rest of the world. The point is that history isn't a respecter of political boundaries, really. So we find the traces of history wherever the people have travelled to or wherever there were administrative connections. So the Virtual Treasury, which is a reconstruction of something that was lost in 1922, seeks out those connections. I think this is important in terms of collaboration, building on other points about the value of collaboration. If history is no respecter of boundaries, then records don't necessarily behave themselves and sit where they're meant to in an archival order, and the topics by which people may wish to investigate them may not all be in one place. So there's huge value in Virtual Treasury. What we're doing is connecting things within one platform and so on, but even without that kind of connection within a single platform and interface, there's huge value in open discussions about how to move digitally from one suite of records to another, where the themes are common, the people may be between both, the place names are integral to both connections and so on and so forth. So I think this whole idea of collaboration within a common framework is really key.
Okay. It's been a fascinating afternoon. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks so much for PRONI. Thanks so much for our panelists for giving us their time. And a final word to David as we close.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stephen. I just want to thank Emer Morelli for launching the PRONI 100 commemorative book. I know she's had to go on to another engagement, but I wanted to thank Emer for being able to come along today. Thanks also from me on behalf of PRONI to our contributors, to Peter, to Orla on screen, and to Jim for their insights and understanding. Thanks to Stephen as chair in Conquer and keeping everything on track and dealing with some unexpected eventualities in terms of having to move to hybrid. I want to thank you everybody for coming along and supporting this event, both here on site and for the audience that was online. And I know there's quite a lot of partners and depositors represented here today. So thank you for your ongoing relationship with PRONI, and I appreciate that support. The programme of activities and events to mark the 20th centenary has been a massive undertaking, and Stephen referenced that earlier. It's involved staff from across the department, across PRONI, and particularly at this closing event, I'd particularly like to acknowledge Stephen and Stephen Scarth. He's been probably the driving force behind PRONI 100, and maybe has driven us to distraction at some points, but generally been overwhelmingly positive in terms of his enthusiasm. And I'd also like to just acknowledge some of his colleagues, Gillian Doherty, Grace Gordon, Lindsay, Gavin, the whole team in public services, but right across PRONI, who've made so much of PRONI 100 a success over the past 12 months. And just a couple of sort of announcements. Finally, for a limited time only, PRONI's oldest document is currently on display in the atrium. The 1219 Papal Bull is in a case if you want to go and view it. Also, our oldest parish register from Christchurch and Lisburn is also on display in the atrium, as is the Ellis Prize that was awarded to the Virtual Record Treasury, which PRONI, the National Archives in Dublin, UK, are partners. So the Ellis Prize is also on display. That's my final word. Thank you everybody for coming. Please go and enjoy your